Welcome to the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, your go-to resource for navigating the world of entrepreneurship. In today's episode, we explore a fundamental aspect of personal and professional growth, emotional intelligence. We explore how emotional intelligence impacts our decision-making, leadership effectiveness, relationship building, and overall well-being as entrepreneurs. Join us as we uncover the power of emotional intelligence and how it can transform your entrepreneurial journey.
The Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast is your ultimate launchpad for igniting ideas and skyrocketing your entrepreneurial dreams. Tune in, buckle up, and let's unleash the entrepreneurial spirit within. Your two hosts will be Professor Gary Palin and serial entrepreneur Ryan Budden.
Hello, Professor Palin. How are you?
Doing really well. How are you today?
I'm doing brilliantly as always. We've gotten together today to discuss emotional intelligence, or emotional quotient, depending on where you're hearing it. For those familiar with it, emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize and understand one's own emotions, as well as effectively perceive and respond to others' emotions. So essentially how you're connecting with one person to another via your emotions and not just raw intelligence.
In addition to managing your own well-being, it helps you build relationships, make sound decisions, and navigate types of social interactions.
Yep, which is very common in entrepreneurship. You're always interacting with those around you.
If you don't, you have a problem.
That's exactly right.
How would you apply emotional intelligence to entrepreneurship, Ryan?
Emotional intelligence is one of the most important aspects of entrepreneurship. And it doesn't mean you have to be the best at it and that's going to lead to your success. It just means you have to have an awareness of it and how it's taking place in the business that you're operating and how your business is communicating with your key audiences. What I mean by that is it impacts the culture that you're participating in your startup, whether you're a leader in it, one of the employees in it, no matter how small or how big you are. Emotional intelligence is how everybody is transmitting information to each other and what they're getting out of each one of those interactions. Being hyper aware of it can really stimulate the culture, which leads to better results.
I agree. And that word awareness is the crux of the issue, and specifically from a starting point, self-awareness. Because if you don't know who you are, you're going to have a very difficult time in building a venture, building a team, etc.
Right. One of the things I really wanted to get in early on this podcast is IQ is really heavily focused on how intelligent is somebody. Studies show that you can increase your IQ about 12 points over the course of your lifetime. So not very much. Whereas your EQ or your EI, your emotional intelligence, can be infinitely increased. There's many studies that show you can continuously work on how good you are at perceiving and reacting to others' emotions and your emotions throughout your lifetime. So it's a skill that you can hone and can work on.
And I would encourage individuals to very much focus on that skill and to work on continually to develop it, because it's those relationships with both yourself and others. If you're not able to pull that off, you are going to struggle in any type of entrepreneurial venture. Because I know of none where you can just sit in a room by yourself and interact with no one.
Yeah, that doesn't exist. Even if you're a software engineer, you're doing coding all day, you still have to work with your counterparts and you still have to work with your employer or the person that you're developing for. Even if it's yourself, you're eventually going to be giving this product to somebody else.
And hopefully they have something called customers.
Yeah, one would hope.
If you aren't able to interact with others, it becomes a struggle. And I've met successful entrepreneurs who were bad at it, but I always think of how much better they could become with their ventures.
That's exactly right.
This drives right into leadership effectiveness, which is another important aspect, because understanding your EI, emotional intelligence, is a major factor with developing your leadership effectiveness.
It sure is. Every great leader that you've ever looked up to absolutely has a high level of emotional intelligence. And I would bet if you zoomed out and looked at what made them a great leader, it would almost always be that one fact, the fact that they had a high degree of emotional intelligence.
Developing this, it helps you to be able to inspire, motivate, and guide teams.
Absolutely, which I think should be a core goal of any entrepreneur.
Also, I look at EI from decision-making capacities, because by having an awareness of both your internal pressures and stress with limited information, in addition to understand the motivations and decisions of others, allows for more efficient, effective decisions.
Absolutely. And you can have tons of processes in place to get that information. So what's stressing people out? What information do they have? Where are the limiting factors? And you can do this really analytically. But what's going to jumpstart that is your emotional intelligence. So you'll be able to perceive this and act on it without having to think about it, the more developed your emotional intelligence is.
Have you ever been involved with a business where you had no challenges, setbacks, or failures?
No. Does it exist?
Don't we wish? Emotional intelligence allows you to be resilient and adaptable for the inevitable challenges, setbacks, and failures that you deal with.
Absolutely. And to overcome those, to not let one of these challenges or obstacles defeat you early on.
And that comes both from internal and external self-awareness, or self-awareness and awareness of others.
It does, because quite oftentimes in a team, one person can sink the boat. So having an awareness of where everybody is critical to success.
Another area that I think is very important is understanding your customers. And EI helps you understand their needs, what their desires are, and even their pain points, which is a term we use very often with opportunity recognition.
And this, again, is one of those areas where you can force it. You can have systems and protocols in place to get that feedback from the customer, but you can have such a better in-depth understanding with a quick conversation and somebody that's really skilled in emotional intelligence.
We've talked about the benefits of emotional intelligence and that it's critical to develop that. What are some tips and strategies for developing emotional intelligence?
Yeah, I think that's key, right? That's why people are listening to this. What are the takeaways? Daniel Goleman does a lot of research on emotional intelligence. He breaks down emotional intelligence into a couple different categories. Those categories are self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. I always find that if you break down a big topic into targetable areas, it really helps going after it. So you can do exercises to increase self-awareness. How are you feeling? Can you check in with yourself throughout the day? What are trigger points for you if you're getting angry or frustrated throughout the day, and what can you do about that? Self-regulation would be mitigating those frustration points throughout the day. Motivation, I think we're all familiar with what motivation is, but how can you increase it? There's lots of studies out there on what you can do on a day-to-day basis to keep yourself motivated, to keep that motivation high throughout the day and not see it wane off throughout the weeks or months. Empathy, we've talked about empathy with leadership in this podcast already, but being able to put yourself in the shoes of those around you. And then the last is social skills. You don't have to be a social butterfly, but you do have to be aware of what's going on around you. We've all seen people commit big social blunders and how difficult it is to be around the person after that.
There are two key areas also to follow along with those or to achieve those issues that you mentioned. One is self-reflection. You should be continually reflecting, and don't lie to yourself. Be honest with that self-reflection. Many people delude themselves, which is a big mistake. But the second one, people I see have tremendous problem with this one, is seeking feedback. Very often they view the feedback as negative and they become defensive. Where encouraging feedback, I talk very often with people and I'll ask for feedback and I have to set a prelude is, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Be brutally honest. It's okay. So,
right.
Or I see my students very often, I have to actually teach them how to receive feedback because they immediately get offended with any contrary to information that they've provided, which is a big obstacle with developing your emotional intelligence.
It is. And going along with that, giving feedback. If you want that feedback, you have to be able to give it and deliver it effectively. Nobody wants you to really put their idea down, but most people are, if they really think about it, open to suggestions, areas for improvement. I've found that delivering feedback helps people a lot to receive that feedback.
That's one of the reasons why I encourage people not to ask their friends what they think of their business idea, because they're being nice to them and they won't give them true feedback.
Yeah, they're asking the person with the rose-colored glasses on.
For sure. And with that also becomes enhancing your communication skills, which is something that you can develop. And follow up with that is to improve your listening skills, which many people are terrible at.
If you just Google exercises for emotional intelligence, there is a plethora of information and exercises that you can do on a daily basis to start increasing your EQ. So I don't know we need to get in depth on what those are, because there are experts that have devoted their career to that. There's so much information out there. What we're harping in on is the ability to continuously increase it over the course of your career and the importance of doing that.
I think in terms of practicing mindfulness and exercises that you can develop.
Absolutely. I think mindfulness not only will get you centered, but also increase your EQ, which the emotional roller coaster of entrepreneurship is real. So anything that's going to keep you grounded and keep you mindful is going to benefit you, even if it's not in the emotional intelligence realm.
Starting a business is not an easy task. That's a fact.
That is the fact. It is not for everybody.
Basically, what I'm hearing is you want to both develop your own self-awareness and then your appreciation to understand the emotions of others as you're developing various interaction relationships and building your venture.
That's exactly right. And it'll make so many of the other things that we've talked about throughout this podcast easier.
Just an awareness of this existence and a focus on developing it will enhance someone's chances of success.
That's exactly right.
Any final words that you have, Ryan?
I'll end with something I typically do. Just take it seriously.
Definitely. Let's get entrepreneurial.
Let's get entrepreneurial.
As we wrap up another episode of the Let's Get Entrepreneurial podcast, we extend our gratitude for your presence and attention. Your dedication to the entrepreneurial spirit fuels our passion for creating this podcast. Check out ProfSpirit.com to discover resources and courses designed specifically for innovators like you. Stay on the cutting edge by following us on Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and other platforms as it is released. Until then, keep the entrepreneurial flame burning.